Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Warwick Esports podcast. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. We had our our last president, Jack Coach Fenton, in to have a little chat about coaching and running trials and that kind of thing. Some people were interested, so we had a little Q&A session, a little seminar type thing with him. I'll give you a little bit of background on him just because I missed that in the recording because I'm stupid. But anyway, Jack was the last founding father to graduate from Warwick, founding father of Warwick Esports, that is. He's been coaching since he was about 13. He started with athletics, and then when he got to university, he started giving feedback to Grey Warwick, our first League of Legends team, on their communication stuff as part of a research project for his linguistics degree. And then, as part of that research project, he was giving them advice on how to improve their comms, and then it just kind of went from there. And he kept coaching them, and eventually he ended up working as a coach for an organization called Petropoulos Esports. So, without further ado, I hand you over to him.
I kind of coached out of the necessity to coach rather than an actual kind of personal desire to do it, but it's something I kind of fall into a lot. I don't know, personality traits or whatever. There's lots of comments you can make there, but when I have been coaching, it's never been out of a expertise. I think that's a really important place to start. I don't think a coach necessarily needs to know more than the people they're coaching. I think they just need to be a good second opinion. Obviously, you need a basic understanding. But so when I started coaching, I was coaching when I was like 13. I was coaching adult runners. I had a very basic understanding, but I was a good motivator. I was somebody who could organize stuff, and that was it really. I think those are the very basics of a coach. Is you just need to be a motivator. You need to be organized, and you need to kind of basically you want to be the person who makes these people want to do better for whatever reason. You need to just be able to find what makes people tick and then keep them ticking, really. I think that's the foundation of a coach. You could coach stuff by knowing absolutely nothing about it, in my opinion. And I have done that actually, recently. So I think one thing you need to get out of the way as soon as you start coaching, say you're sitting down with a top team, and it's very different depending on the kind of people you're coaching, but say you sit down with a group of people you would consider more talented at the game you're coaching than yourself, which in the university scene is normally the case because otherwise you'd probably be playing on that team. And say you sit down with these people who are probably better at the game, may have lack of knowledge, they may just be those kind of solo queue maniacs that just play purely out of mechanics. But when you sit down with these people, the first thing you need to get out of them and out of your own psyche is any imposter syndrome. You need to immediately try and relinquish this idea that these guys, that for any reason you may not be able to coach these people. It's something I battled with a lot when I first started coaching. And actually, I coached this league team that I started coaching, and that's when I first kind of started taking coaching really seriously. The Null team, and Kerberos was playing on the team at the time, who the older members in this chat will recognize, who was a very talented League of Legends player who's now graduated and is playing professionally in Prime League, Germany. He wasn't playing. He got signed. Someone noticed his Null gameplay, signed him for a UK team, and then they needed a coach, and he actually recommended me. So that kind of was a confidence booster for me. But then I went in that to coach a team of 5 challenger players, and I was like, well, what the hell do I do with this? Had to overcome the same anxiety, and that's constantly there. What you got to remind yourself is that you're the 6th, or if it's Overwatch, you're the 7th eye on this team. If it's obviously Rocket League, you're the 4th, but you are the extra set of eyes, you're an extra brain, and your perspective is vastly different to theirs. And when you watch a game, they may come out and they may have won, they may have lost, and you'll have ideas in your head of how you want them to improve. And the most important thing you can do, the most crucial thing you can do as well, is make it constructive. And this sounds really, really basic, right? Everyone will say, oh, constructive feedback this, constructive feedback that. I think it's the absolute basics. It's why I'm saying that you need to do these things. But it is literally the essential. So say you come out of you've watched them play a game, they sit down, and you are like, okay, we lost this game because of one key moment. This happens in every esport. There's always a moment, a turning point. You occasionally just get outclassed. That's okay. You can just admit it, like say to your players, these guys are good. But when you have those games where you could have won them, you need to talk about why, not talk about what. That's the most important thing. You identify what the issue is, and then you ask why that happened. You don't just constantly point out what went wrong, because that just demoralizes everybody. And that applies from anybody. If you're coaching someone who is an absolute beginner of the game, you need to identify, okay, this is the main feature. Say if I was teaching someone to play Rocket League and they were just struggling to actually hit the ball, you'd identify that this is the issue, and then you wouldn't put a video in front of them and go, you're doing this wrong, which actually a lot of esport coaches do, and it's really frustrating. I've seen it a lot of times. I think it's a really toxic behavior. What you want to do is you want to get that video in front of them and then say, oh no, but this is what you should have done. This is why this is going wrong. This is what you want to do instead.
This stuff can definitely be implemented at a low level though, because I know people have asked about league coaching, as in like not even like coaching for like teams, but like one-to-one coaching for like people who want to improve.
Mm-hmm.
So this stuff can definitely be implemented there. Like this stuff is pretty also useful there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, please ask questions. Feel free to just stay unmuted and just butt in. Like, I think, yeah, there's lots of different ways of coaching, right? You can coach one-to-ones. There might be someone in this society. One thing I've always wanted to happen, and actually never actually happened with me, was I never had someone who go, oh, I play this game, but I really want to play this game. Can you teach me how to play it?
Yeah, we're planning to run game nights where like we teach other people how to play like a certain game.
That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
But then you've got everything from those environments to team environments to trials. I know there's people in here who want to know about trials. I'm more than willing to explain that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, I think I got to a pretty good point just before the doorbell went off, in terms of just explaining kind of real basics. I could probably write out some stuff about it, to be honest, make it a bit more clear and give things names and rules and stuff, but that kind of stuff starts to get game specific. But I'll explain one more experience and I'll just let you guys ask me questions, because I think this experience kind of was a huge learning experience for me, but also I think it's really beneficial for you guys, regardless of what game you're coaching, how you can healthily coach a group, whether they're regardless of ability, game, your own knowledge, etc. So recently, I obviously was working towards exams, dissertation, graduation. So I moved down from my more senior position at the company I was working at Diabolus. And they have a WoW team, one of the best WoW teams in the world. And traditionally in World of Warcraft arena, they don't have a coach. They have a 4-person team, and it's a 3v3 game style in an arena. Normally they play in best of 5s. So the 4th person normally operates as a coach, but they swap out so that they can play specific comps. They'd never really had a coach before, and this team just needed a little bit of a nudge to become better. So I stepped down from my more senior role and just took up coaching this team. And I've never played WoW before. I have friends who play WoW, yet I was able to coach these guys. And I think that's quite an important kind of thing for me to be able to explain to you guys, because kind of takes some stress off you, gives you a good insight into kind of mindset, I guess. So when I sat down with them, we watched games, and even though I didn't understand, I could identify where things were going wrong by just listening to them and asking them, okay, what went wrong here? I may not have been actually fixing any issues, but what I was making them do was talk about these issues and making them theorize things themselves. And this is the best way people can learn, and the best way they can learn long term as well. And this can be done at any level. Even if you've got a brand new beginner to a game, if they something goes wrong, sit them down, say what went wrong here, get them to try and work it out, and they'll learn not necessarily faster, but they'll learn properly, because they'll actually have to solve these problems in their own mind. They'll have to look at what they're doing wrong and go, oh, actually, yeah, this is what I need to do. Or they'll go, actually, I don't know what went wrong here. Can you explain it to me? And then that makes it easier to coach, because what I see a lot in beginner coach sessions is they're actually explaining the wrong concepts to them. They're just explaining a concept that they personally think is important. Whereas this beginner may actually be a natural at that part of the game, but may really struggle with another part of the game. Like say it's, I don't know what game. I'm trying to fix it up to more than just League of Legends and stuff. Say you're trying to teach, say you're trying to teach someone in Rocket League, and you're, one of the first things you want to teach them may be aerials. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but just hypothetically, you want to, in your mind, you think, okay, I've got to teach this guy aerials. I think it's crucial to being a Platinum Plus player. But what you may not realize is this person's actually just naturally very good at aerials. What you should be teaching them is positioning or dribbling or any other feature of the game. And it's really important to sit them down and get them to talk about their experiences, so then you can learn together. Like, it should be a collective experience. You need to learn about the people you're coaching, and they need to learn about themselves throughout their experience. And that's the kind of way the loop goes, is you constantly just make them question themselves, make them think about the game, and it just loops around like that. And even when I was coaching in more high stakes environments, that's the way I'd do it. And I'll go for a more kind of advanced kind of League of Legends specific experience, is when I was coaching Diabolus' league team in the UK season. We're playing in a tournament. We made it all the way to the finals. But even in the semi-finals, where we were one game down in a best of 3, when we were drafting, I would still say, what would you want? What do you want here? I never made the decision for my players. I feel quite strongly about this. This is specific to me. There are more authoritarian people. But I think given the university context, where you're not being paid for this, the players aren't being paid for this, players are doing it for fun, you've got to make sure that it's their experience, and they're playing the game the way they want to play. Because as soon as you get to a high level play, a player above, that's in the top 1 or 2% of any game, has a style, and the best way you can win is by bringing out that style and facilitating that. And if you're drafting a game of League of Legends, you need to say, what do you want here? Like, say I had a red side 5th pick in my draft, I wouldn't, and there was a champion in my head that was the perfect counter pick. I wouldn't pick that for my player if they didn't want it. In fact, I'd even give them a losing matchup if that's what they wanted, because what's most important is that they're comfortable, and then that applies to any game. Valorant, you may pick an agent that is weak right now, or doesn't suit the comp, or doesn't suit the map, but you'd pick it anyway because they're comfortable. And that's really, really important, is that they're comfortable, and then you make the most of what they've got. So they may be, okay, give me a Valorant agent that's not very good.
Sage. Yeah.
Okay, so they've that someone is a very good Sage player, it's not in the meta, you then start to devise strategies that allows you to get the best out of them and the best out of the team. And then it also then gives you a unique way of playing the game. And some other teams that just play meta only will start to struggle against you. And it turns this, what is a possible negative, into an advantage. And I think you see that a lot at very high level esports, where they have the ability to play these other things, but instead of completely removing themselves and alienating themselves and just becoming a meta slave, I think the best coaches and the best players know how to get the best out of their own individual benefits. And that's one thing that you can kind of keep in your mind when you're teaching beginners as well, is just allow them to have a personality and express that through the game. I know when I was taught League of Legends, I was just told to play tanks because they're easy, play support because it's easy, it's the best way to learn the game, blah, blah, blah. But if they seriously want to play the game and get good at it and enjoy it, you should just let them fall off the bike more. But fall off the bike playing games, playing roles or characters or strategies that they actually prefer doing. Like I was teaching an ex-girlfriend who wanted to learn League of Legends and she wanted to play assassins. I wasn't going to just be like, no, e-girl, play support. I just insisted that they continue to try. They fell off the bike so much more playing assassin, but they enjoyed the experience much more. It was slower, but they're still playing the game now, and that's not a surprise, right? You just got to encourage those individual things and allow the game experience to be specific to the people that are involved. So, do people want to start asking questions now? So it's more seminar-y.
I have one if no one else wants to go first. Going back a little bit, you were speaking about like playstyles and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
How much of like playing at the top levels, like in the uni scene or in any scene, how much of playing at that level is identifying playstyles and countering playstyles as opposed to just playing what you want to play?
I'd say the difference between a good and a great team are the teams that identify a playstyle.
Right.
I'd say at the absolute upper echelons of gameplay, the best teams have an identity and they play to those identities. Like even if we remove ourselves from esports, right? If we look at Barcelona, for example, they've been doing what they do for so long and being so good at what they do because they have an identity, and they can stick to that identity, and they try and encourage certain strategies. They teach their young players to play those strategies. They make certain signings so they can continue to play this tiki-taka football. That works for them, so they continue that, and that's what makes them time and time again be good. Like even in the current scenario where they're making awful transfers and having huge issues internally, they're still playing well because they've got this heavily indented style and identity. But they're also able to adapt that identity when they play against certain teams. So say they play against Atletico Madrid, a team they've historically struggled against, because Atletico Madrid's style is defensive, reserved, low risk, low reward, 1-0 wins. They then have to adapt that strategy. They need to become more fluent. They need to become even arguably more scrappy when they're normally an elegant-based football club. And you'll see the same in esports teams. Say, let me think. I'm trying to mix my game analogies up.
I mean, just go for League of Legends if you can't come up with anything else.
But say you're in Counter-Strike and your players benefit. They play well when you play a lot of rush strategies, and and then you do really well with all these rush strategies, you make that part of your identity. You then start creating your own unique rush moves and things like that. When it comes to playing against a team that is really good against that, you need to find unique adaptations that allow you to harness your style but make it more applicable to different scenarios, so that you don't get countered. I think a really good quote I read from an old Arsenal Football Club manager, he basically popularized the 4-3-3 formation in football, and he said, this is, and someone was interviewing him and said, this is working really well for you. Do you intend to change? Do you intend to freshen it up or adapt your play style? And he said, no, I'm gonna keep doing it until someone works it out, and then we'll find a new method. And that tends to work as a coaching strategy. Is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then when it does break, fix it. Revolutionize it, bring some fresh ideas to the table, but make sure that you're leaning on what you do best. Like if you have an excellent, say you're playing in Rocket League and you have an excellent goalkeeper, you wouldn't then play a heavily rotated strategy where your goalkeeper's regularly rotating out of goal, because then they'd be out of their comfort zone too often. But then there may be games where you need to rotate heavily because you're against a team that struggles against teams that have that play in a very dynamic style. So if you're in that kind of situation, you may want to swap to rotating a bit more, but you still would want to do that within reason. You wouldn't then start making them play 50-50 forward and defense. You'd make them play maybe 70-30 or something like that instead of a 100% strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, like, what's a good way of identifying the strengths and weaknesses? Is it just scrimming and then trying new stuff? And
so this sounds really I think this sounds really dumb. And obviously scrimming, trying stuff, working out what works is obviously, that's the results-based way. And this is one thing I actually think is completely understated, is you talk to your team. Like what feels like it's working is sometimes more important than what is actually working.
right.
Like you may be winning games on a comp where everyone is uncomfortable, but that's not going to last forever. That's normally just either luck or you're riding the meta, but that's always a short-term success. And until you start to feel comfortable doing that, which is another way, you just keep doing that comp until everyone starts to feel comfortable on the comp, and then you'll go from winning because of the comp to winning because you're good. But it's that point where you can say, you talk to your team, what feels good? What do you like doing? Like, what is your personal identity as a player? Some people won't know, which often means they're just quite malleable. But some people will be like, I am an assassin player. And therefore you give them assassins, and then you give other people characters that fit around that. And that then goes all the way back to drafting your rosters and your trials, where you're going to want to put together a combination of people so that you can play strategies that bring out everybody's benefits. It's something that people have actually slated me for in the past. I remember when I did my first trials for the League of Legends first team, I got slated saying, oh, why is this person not in the team? He's so much better than the person you put in instead. So I don't know if anybody of you remember, but way back we had this player called Sammy and this other guy called Ihan. Sammy was like challenger / master, very, very high level player, but he played off meta champions, which is not necessarily the issue. The issue was that he played selfishly. Whereas I had other players that played selfishly too, and I couldn't have them all in the same team because that's simply not possible. It wouldn't mesh correctly. It wouldn't benefit everybody. And they kept saying, "Oh, this guy's so good! Like he just auto win you games like solo." And I said, no, but that's not how it works. Like, if I actually want to have a good team where everybody enjoys themselves, I don't want someone shutting up because this guy's just not going to play to my strategy at all. I then took on someone who was a much more supportive player to play in that mid lane role, so that I could then facilitate my the rest of the team. Because at the time, that was the way the game was best played, was when you had a supportive mid laner. And I also had character types in my teams that would have clashed with that guy because he was quite toxic as well as selfish. And I had another player who wasn't toxic but had a selfish playstyle. So I took one selfish playstyle player and allowed him to fit in like puzzle pieces with the other ones that worked, and we did very well because of it. But I know that those strategies wouldn't have been available to me if I picked that other player for my team.
So where's the trade-off between individual skill and fitting into a team, and like?
So I made a
find
list.
that?
I made a list once for someone who told me that they were given some money and they had to build an Overwatch team. And they asked me, they're like, oh, well, I know you're really outspoken about character preferences of people when you build your teams. I put mechanics like 5th in my list. For me, it was communication was first. I mean, obviously, I'm slightly biased as a linguist graduate now, but it was mainly because I wanted someone who could explain to me what they wanted, so then I could get that out of them, and also to make sure they were enjoying themselves. Because if they were unable to tell me this is what they want, then I may not have matched the goals up properly. Because I would hate to push somebody who's just playing for fun. But also I want them to be able to say to me, oh, this isn't working for me, coach. Can we play something else? Or I also would want them to say, like, this is working, let's keep doing this. But then also communicating with the other people on the team. So for me, it was like communication, personal drive. Obviously, I want them to work hard on the advice I'm giving them. Then it was game understanding, which by no means at all correlates with game skill. I have met some phenomenal players with zero game knowledge, who just do everything by reaction time, gut instinct, but actually have no understanding of the game itself that they're playing. That is very possible, and I'm sure you'll have experienced it at some point. And then it was macro, and then it was micro. And game understanding and macro is different too, because macro is in the game and game understanding is both in and out of the game. Again, this varies for different games, but I think that's more or less applicable. So yeah, for individual skill comes below someone who's a good communicator and a hard worker every single time for me.
Okay. I'll let someone else ask a question if anyone has one, because I've asked a few here.
I was wondering what advice you have with regards to when you get conflict within your team of people having differing opinions on what's meta or what's the right thing to do in this case, or like, you get the idea, right?
Yeah, I get the idea, and it's a very good question. It's one I've had before, and it's a question I was hoping someone would ask. So thanks for the question. So this is another one that I think has to be taken well. This is another reason I encourage you all to not be authoritarian coaches, especially in the university scene. Like I say, no one's being paid for it, so you can't force anyone to do anything. And you need to remind them that. Just say, I'm not going to force you to do these things. But if you get a conflict, say you lost a game and someone thinks it's because of a poor drafting decision or a poor game decision or someone just playing poorly even, there can be any reason for a fallout. One of the things that I think is good is encourage it at the moment. Don't just try and stamp it out, and let it play out. Let them talk. Ask them questions during it. Why do you think this? explain this, show me. So then that makes sure that it's not a personal grudge, it's not unfounded, and then make it constructive. So say if there's a disagreement, so you have a game, you lose, one of your players thinks it's because of a certain character that you picked, or a certain strategy that you chose to go with, and you come out of the game and this person's like, this is wrong, we lost because of this, and someone else is saying, no, that's not wrong, we just played badly, or even sometimes, no, you played badly, that's why we lost. It's quite funny, often the person who played badly is the first one to blame something else. That's something you will experience all the time. Just ask them questions. Ask them why you think this, explain it to me, let's watch the VOD back. Do you think this is the case? Say there's a new patch out, you may disagree about how strong or weak a character is. Just make them think about why and make them try these things out. So you lose a game, he thinks it's because of the comp. You go to scrims, you play with the same comp, it goes really well. That disproves their theory. Or you lose again with the same comp, and you're like, okay, the issue here is maybe the comp, let's try something else, but make sure it's a purposeful decision. Identify where the problem may be with the comp, try and make a strategic decision. Let's play with this character instead, or let's do this strategy instead. And make sure people are understanding the feedback that they are giving, as well as the feedback you're giving yourself. Always explain yourself. Never just go, okay, this week we're playing dive comps because I said so. It should always be, it's because I think it will suit you best. It's because it's really good in the meta right now. It's because it will counter the team that we're going to play next week. Always explain why you're doing things, and always make sure your players are able to explain why, because then it turns conflict into discussion, and there's a very thin line between the two, and I personally think it's the coach's ability to turn it to a discussion rather than a conflict, and it's very easy to do as well. Just need to make them explain why, make them not make it personal, make it be constructive. If someone's saying this comp is shit, make them say why it's shit, make them say what they think it's gonna be instead of one of them just being like, that was completely in. It's really important to just vocalize why, and then it makes it discussion, and then your team's actually learning through that experience. I think the most benefit my teams have ever had, the most improvement I've ever got out of the team, is when they were discussing things a lot. Sometimes it would get heated, but I didn't care how heated it got, just as long as everybody was explaining why, making sure it wasn't personal, making sure that it was, I think this about the game, because everyone's always going to have different thoughts, and I think this is one thing that a lot of esports game makers have kind of realized, especially League of Legends, that they realize that the best way to balance games is by having a bunch of unique aspects within the game that can be interpreted by different people. And then within your team, you're going to have the players plus yourself plus potentially other coaching staff. And that's a lot of opinions. And you've just got to find the middle ground between where all those opinions link. You may all have completely different opinions, but there will be a common ground somewhere. You'll all fall somewhere on the spectrum, and you find the most middle point, and you try and play that. And that's how you kind of try and make it suit. But also experimentation, of course. If it's a discussion about a patch comes in, a character you've been playing with for the last 3 weeks has been nerfed, someone says it's going to be dead now, someone else says that it's going to be still playable, you take it to the practice grounds, or you explain why you think that nerf influence. Say their CC was reduced by half a second. Someone's like, oh, that's completely gutted the champion, they're unplayable now. Get them to vocalize why. If they're like, oh yeah, it's that CC that we rely on when we play this champion, or we play this character, or we play this agent, get them to explain, or we rely on this CC, so we shouldn't play with this character anymore. But someone else would be like, no, actually, this character, we play this character for the DPS, not the CC, so this nerf isn't going to influence our playstyle. And yeah, like I said, that can be applied to anything. It's just, get them to explain why, how, sometimes who, but often why and how is all you need to get people to vocalize and explain a conflict. Because then often you'll all fall on the same page. We'd have this about League all the time because obviously a patch comes in every 1 or 2 weeks. And we'd have to talk about, this is good, this is bad. And then they'd end up agreeing because someone actually started to make a good argument or a good point, and people would be like, actually, that's a good point. We definitely rely on that. And then it goes the other way. It allows you to theory craft stuff better too, because your team will be like, oh, guys, I realized we play really well when we do this. Why don't we try playing this? Or let's try this set play that I saw Cloud9 do last week, or let's try this set play that I saw Rogue do 2 weeks ago. Let's try this out. Let's try that out. And then that's when everything starts becoming discussion. And often that's when the players will start to enjoy themselves more, because then they feel like they're part of a community that's always talking about what they're doing. I really enjoyed my time coaching because it felt like every day I'd have a discussion to have somebody on the phone, and it was nice. We're always theory crafting. Oh, I reckon this will make us play better. I reckon this character's overpowered. I reckon this is better. I reckon blah blah blah. And it's fun. It's a good experience. You've got to encourage discussion. Because if you ever tell people not to, that's when conflict will start. Because people will just bottle stuff up and not talk about it. So yeah, always encourage talk, even if it begins toxic. You can make it positive, in my opinion.
Nice.
I think Walden, you also had a question, right? You unmuted at the same time as Alex before.
Yes, I was going to ask, is it viable to coach a team that you're on, specifically in Rocket League where there's only 3 players on a team?
Yeah, I think it's viable to play a coach. If you personally believe that you're better than having somebody else there, then yeah. I think at this level, definitely. I think it's when you get to kind of professional levels, it's not so viable. But I think at this level, it's absolutely fine. And it's something that I encouraged from my kind of lower level League of Legends teams, is just having a captain on the team who was very vocal, who would kind of handle, if you did practice sessions, even there was a lot of kind of silver and gold teams in our League of Legends. They used to actually do practice games, whether it be flex queue or scrims against their friends in custom games. It was normally just a captain on the team, the most enthusiastic or the one with the most game knowledge. They would be the one who identified issues or had a little notebook next to them while they were playing the game and just wrote timestamps down, so that they could go back to a VOD and do it. But I think it's really viable purely because I think that coaching should be a learning experience for everyone, including the coach. You don't need to be a voice of reason. You just need to be that 4th set of eyes. I think it is doable because you just have to be the person who watches the replays before everybody else or makes a little more effort. But if you think you or that person is capable, then yeah, I absolutely think that's viable. Yeah.
Cool.
Could you run through your ideal trial setup?
Okay, so obviously my experience doing trials is only with League of Legends, so take this with a pinch of salt. But I normally, obviously, I did talk about how I think that there is the micro gameplay skill is my lowest on my list. There is still a cutoff point, right? Everyone has a gauge of how good the players are in their society. And most games have their own elo systems. So you can kind of work out who are the top players. You then draw a line slightly below what you think this top is, so that then it gives these other people a chance. So I think it did change every year, just depending on the members we had in the Society for League. But I think it was D4 one year, I made it Platinum 1 another year. I think it was even D3 once because we had so many good players at the time. But yeah, you just kind of say anybody above this line can apply. Make that line generous because you want at least 2 times the amount of slots you have on your first team. I personally think 3 or 4 times is best. But again, more resources and mental struggle from yourself. So take of that what you will, but I like to give as many people an opportunity as I can. But you want to get this group of players, and then you want to invite them to a first. I think it's best done in 2 stages. You have a first stage where you rotate literally everybody, just get them to play games. You're watching them, and you watch them play. You get them to play for several games. I think for League, because it takes about an hour to play a game each time, we'd do about 4 or 5 in an afternoon. I'd make sure everybody played at least twice, so that I could get to see everyone at least twice in their main roles and with a mix of different people on the team. I'd listen to the comms. I'd jump in between each game. I'd set them up in a temporary Discord, and I'd jump between them myself and just listen to their comms so I could hear how they were talking. Then I'd get an idea. You get an idea quite quickly of who your kind of main 1 or 2 players are. And then what you do is you kind of rotate them between the teams to see how they get on with the other players. You'll find almost every time you have a trial, you almost always have 1 or 2 star players that kind of shine mechanically, or you may even just know that they're good from previous years or just from ridiculous amounts of elo that they've got because somehow they can afford to play the game that much, or whatever. And once you have this first day, you get to see everybody. You then invite back a shortlist, basically. I guess it's a bit like X Factor, to be honest. You bring back this shortlisted group. Unfortunately, you have to send some people away. Explain why you sent them away as well. Don't just go, you've not made it. I actually would DM everybody individually saying, you made it. I really liked this about you. Congrats. See you tomorrow. And also just give them a little tip, because often people are happy that they're shortlisted, but they're not sure what they need to showcase. So I think quite a lot of the time I'd be like, I really liked what you showed today, but you didn't show very many different characters. Could you show me more variety tomorrow? Because if you do, that might be the thing that proves you. But then the ones I sent away, I'd be like, hey, sorry, you were too quiet this year and communication is really important to me, so you've not quite made the cut. Here's your other opportunities. Send them away to the normal Google form. But always make sure you explain why. Like some years I had to send away very talented players who other years would have made the shortlist, maybe even made the first team. But I've just said, oh, I've got a lot of good players here this year. Actually, your position's the most, there's a really high demand for junglers this year, so I've had to send you away, and just how it is. And sometimes they're understanding, sometimes you get screamed at. Unfortunately, it's part of the job. But you just have to kind of diffuse it and explain why. I guess that's the big learning from today, is why. So that's the main question. I think it's at the bottom of kind of everything I do. It does cause plenty of existential crisis, but I think that's key to being a good coach. Being a bit existential. But yeah, and then this shortlist, I'd bring them back and I'd get them to try and show me what suits the current meta, treat it more like a scrim, make less changes between the 2 rosters, and get them just to play head to head. And then you can kind of start to gauge those things that you kind of valued the most. You can talk to those people that you saw in the first day that were exceptional, or were exceptional, or they were the captain of the first team the year before and you want to keep them being the captain. You may actually DM them, take them aside, talk to them, say, okay, who did you get on really well with? Who do you think's got potential? And get their opinions. There was some years it was so tricky, I'd asked everybody their opinion on other people, or to get them to give me an individual reason why they should be on the team. And then I'd match that up. And the final team would normally, the crunch time would come down to personality types. They'd need to all match up. They'd need to all be equally enthusiastic. I wouldn't want any toxicity. I want them all to be vocal. If there was a quiet person, I'd need to make sure that was counteracted by having someone who talked more than average to make sure that they could talk on their behalf. So, for example, League of Legends, one of our best players was Koki. But Koki is extremely renowned for not talking at all. But I counteracted that by putting in bot lane with Send, Tom, who's just one of the most talkative people you've ever meet in your life, who also got on with Koki really well, which meant he could talk on their behalf quite a lot, which reduced their kind of social anxiety within the game and helped them play better. So yeah, I'd say that's the way I'd do it in a kind of 2-stage thing. Everyone who qualifies, then you cut that down to a short list of normally just kind of 2 teams, and then you kind of mix them around until that works out. So in Rocket League, say you'd start with 12, 15 people, and then your second day you'd have 7 or 8, and 3 of them would make the cut. Often I like to just qualify 2 teams, because if you've got enough players, you may as well have an A and a B team, because then because like I said, there's been a lot of times where I've had a player who, on paper, in terms of their ability to play the game individually, is first team material, but has a personality issue, or doesn't play enough champions, or they don't suit the meta at all right now. Like literally at all. Like I say, talk about playing to people's advantages, but if this person plays the most unbelievably uncompatible character, then sometimes it's more difficult than finding someone with a different style, if that makes sense. There's always limits to philosophy. So yeah, but that's why I like to build 2 rosters. Obviously, I normally just have the resources to coach one myself, but I like to build 2 rosters because then I can purposefully put a certain person on the second team. Like Ellis, who's been one of our best League of Legends players for a really long time. He got put on academy for like 2 full years before he made our first team this last year, and that's because he had very big issues in his gameplay, and I told him, you've not quite made the cut this year, but I need you to work on this, and I need you to work on that, and they did, and then a few years later he was on the first team. In fact, that happened with almost my entire roster for this last year. Dard, Tom, Koki, everybody except Koki maybe had played on the second roster prior, and they'd earned their role, or they'd been given feedbacks to say, okay, next time trials comes around, if you can show me this, you're going to be on the first team. And I stuck to my word. So
Okay, I'd like to finish this up by 4. So does anyone have any quick pressing questions?
I think Fornic had one, but I don't know if it would.
Oh, I was gonna ask about trials at the same time.
okay, cool.
Okay, Noma, you've unmuted.
Yeah, what about laying off a player? Say you're a coach and you decide to let off a player. How do you break it to them?
Okay, good question, and an important one. I'm really happy you asked that. It's hard, and it's the least enjoyable thing I've ever done. And I'll give you another kind of anecdote to make it kind of experience-based. But again, since we're finishing up, please DM me if you have more questions. I'm happy to call people individually. I'm happy to do another one of these, whatever suits. But I talked about Koki earlier. I went to this pro team that I got picked up for playing the UK League, and I actually took Koki with me as my starting AD carry. And his inability to talk really damaged the team to the point where I had to let him off. And the most important thing you do when you're in a position where you think you might have to let somebody go is you give them forewarning, and you say, okay, this is a really big issue right now. Explain what the issue is. It may be communication. It may be the character they're playing is just too far out of the meta, and that's the only one they can really play. Or it maybe their individual skill. That's the hardest one. That is a heartbreaker. Sometimes you just made a wrong judgment. Then maybe they're not mechanically up to scratch, and you know that there's an alternative that's better than them. But you just take them aside and say, look, this is an issue right now, and you say, let's work on this together. Don't tell them that their spot's at risk, but say, you know, we really need to work on this. Is really crucial to the team's success, and make sure that that's the emphasis of the next few training sessions. This is important both for them, yourself, and the whole team, because if this is an issue, this is often apparent to the whole team and can start to really upset the team. Like if you feel like you're being sandbagged by someone who's not working hard enough, not talking enough, just bad at the game or anything, it will start to upset the rest of the team. But if you go into training sessions saying, okay, today we're going to do this, say when I had Koki, I'd say, okay, today we're going to be working on communication. I wouldn't say specifically Koki's communication, but you'd say, okay, I'm listening to everybody. I want to make sure you're all talking, and stuff like that. Or if it's they need to play a new character, okay, we're going to work on this, playing around this other character that this person needs to play, and you just keep trying to work on that. And then if after a week or two, however much you're willing to give, again, this is specific to how intense the tournament is right now, how many games you can afford to lose, you take them aside and you go, okay, look, we've been working on this. I think you're struggling a lot. I'm going to swap you out for the player in the second team. Are you willing to do that? Am I going to need to find a substitute for them? Because a lot of people, if they can't play for the first team, will just drop out because their ego is too fragile. If that's the situation, that's just the situation. And yeah, you just try and go from there. Explain to them, this is what we're doing. But you need to make sure you've tried to fix it first, because otherwise it's just, I personally think it's a disservice to them if you have kicked someone out without giving them the chance to fix that issue. But yeah, that's the way I'd go about it. And then when you have to let them down, you say, look, we've been trying to fix this, but it's too much of an issue. So we're going to have to make a drastic change, and that drastic change is you moving down. But also the benefit to trying to fix it before you then let them leave is that they know what it is. So they're normally more willing to go to the second team, or whatever team you may be coaching, the third team. They might be moving down to the fourth. They're more willing to step down because they know what they've got to fix. They might go and spend that time fixing it because it's in their brain now. And they know that you're not just kicking them for a personal reason. So yeah, you've proved it to them and to yourself, and you've tried, always try. Because often you might even just find that they do just fix that issue. But there are some things where you do have to just boot them. Like if they're being super toxic, if they were really outrageous one training session, you can just say that was unacceptable behavior. I'm gonna have to boot you from the team. But in that kind of situation, you're more than justified. And that's normally something that you'd go and talk to Dan about, because that would be more than just game based or coaching based. That would be behavioral issue. But yeah, that's the way I'd go about it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jack.
And if you are in these situations, please, you can message me and just explain the exact situation you've got. And at the moment, I'm unemployed looking for jobs, so I have quite a bit of time on my hands all of a sudden these last few weeks. So if you do want to call me in and say, oh, I've got a training session or certain my team's, especially if it's communication, any game, I will be able to come in and help you with some comms stuff if you want me to. I'm more than willing to just come in and give you tips and pointers. I could do it for any game. Come in and help your team talk better. If they're either too quiet or too loud and they're overlapping each other, I can teach some techniques. I've got some slideshows and seminars saved on my computer that I can run through you guys. So yeah.
Very important. Yeah. What are your predictions for this year's first team for league?
I don't know if there's any spicy freshers. I'd have to watch trials to predict. I don't know who's sticking around from the grey members who didn't graduate as well. So, but I'd have to talk to everybody. But yeah.
Fair.